Hey everyone, and welcome to April in Review. So this is a video where I take a look at all the new to me board games I played during the month and I rank them from my least favourite to my most favourite. I've got more games than usual here with a massive 22 new games played, ranging from very light to very heavy, old and brand new games. So I think considering the amount of games I have here, I'm going to make a bit more of an effort to be as quick and as brief as I can, so I can get through these pretty quickly. But keep an eye out during the upcoming months or so, and I'm sure I'll be releasing more content about these games. But let's get started on the rankings. At number 22, I have Immuno Wars, which was actually a copy provided to me by the designers themselves. This is a dueling style game as you are trying to damage each other and kill each other, but you're doing that through infecting each other with diseases and viruses and things. And I did like, the thing I did like about this game is that rather than just smashing each other and taking a whole chunk of health off, you are slowly kind of damaging people over time as you're bleeding out or you're slowly getting infected. And you have to try and counteract that with kind of curing cards and things to make yourself healthy again. So I did quite like that, but the rest of the game was, as you'd probably expect with a dueling style game, it's very random, very swingy. There's some take that cards. You can be very restricted by the cards you have in your hand. Like for example, in the game we had, one of the players only had curing cards and they didn't have anything to damage the other players. So very luck dependent, and it was a bit of a mess of a game, to be honest. And I was kind of sold that this was going to be a more strategic style game, hence why I said I would happily review it, but it didn't turn out to be the case. And this is pretty much your mass market, in your face, take that style game, which is just not my taste at all. At number 21, I have Atlantis. So not only is this game terrible, it also has one of the worst game names I've ever heard. It doesn't work at all for the game. This is a simple little area majority style game where you're rolling dice and then collecting different resources of different types. I'm trying to have the most of them at the end. That's pretty much the extent of the game. Very bland, very basic, just completely boring game, and I didn't enjoy it one bit. So that is Atlantis at number 21. At number 20, I have Mob Big Apple. So this is actually a brand new Kickstarter delivery, and it's by Dr. Steve Finn, who's a really good designer actually. At least some of his designs have been extremely well received, such as Biblios. This one has a cool theme, as you are these rival gangs. And you are basically deploying troops out on these different streets, and you're doing that by rolling dice. And yeah, that's going to determine where you can put your troops. But whenever you take an action, you are also going to follow that up with a worker placement action, which can do other things, such as increasing the loot you're going to get from these streets, and different things like that. I thought the idea was quite cool. This was another game that I found very difficult to extract any fun from. I thought it was quite a rigid game, where because all the combat system, you would kind of one-on-one cancel each other out. It was quite predictable on what would happen, and also whenever you tried to be a bit strategic with it, you were always restricted by the dice rolls and you couldn't really determine where you would go. So again, the gameplay didn't quite work with me. I thought the worker placement bit was a bit tacked on, and it could have been, it could have been more to explore. And I thought there was quite a few rough edges with this game. It didn't feel like it was play tested enough. But again, I've only played it the once, so I will need to play it some more just to cement some feelings on it. Wonderful production. I mean, it looks absolutely stellar, but the gameplay was certainly lacking for me. At number 19, I have Lancelot, which is kind of a point-to-point movement style game as you're trying to collect all these different artifacts and things, from this Arthurian legend, and you're trying to complete these contracts. There's this big public contract board. So some things might say, have X amount of these weapons or X amount of these ships and things. And you're doing that by moving point to point, again, collecting them as you go. When you go to certain spots, you're going to slow down as you slowly kind of slide from one spot to the next before you can move on. But there's some cool concepts in this game where if you get to the end before your opponent does, then the person kind of sitting there waiting could slowly kind of increase up this track, which could potentially gain them more points at the end. So I did like that tension of, you want to be quick so you can get to that spot, but you do need to take your time and visit these spots in order to get the contracts completed in the first place. So again, a cool idea, but it didn't quite work in practice because it was quite stagnant, not an exciting game at all. And there was very few points on offer to complete these contracts, which would take quite a lot of time to do. So yeah, that felt a bit... Again, it felt like you were doing a lot of work for very little in return. I think maybe that's a psychological thing because it was quite a low-scoring game. And there was another cool thing where if you arrive back at the centre, you can choose to almost invest in the different spots, which would make it more efficient if you visited those spots. So for example, if you'd collect one ship, you might be able to collect an extra ship in the same time, that kind of thing. So I did quite like that, and you could even have a kind of a diverse little portfolio of little things you could invest in as well, but people could kick you off them. But again, the gameplay itself was lacking again. It wasn't great, and it was another game that left me feeling pretty bored, to be honest. At number 18, I have Ima Rosa. So this one is certainly going to win the most unique game this month. So this is a game that actually uses your hearing as a mechanism, as you're dropping these cubes into this big pyramid. And it's like the stacking pyramid where these cubes can get trapped in any single layer, and you've almost got to try and guess where your cubes have landed, or guess where the other people's cubes have landed. And the more accurately you do that, the more points you're going to get. That's pretty much the gist of the game. There was a few bits of confusion in this game. I wasn't quite sure we were playing it correctly. But again, this is a first impression. I need to play it again. But, full props for being different. And it's got quite a cool little table presence. And it's quite remarkable how that sound system actually works. Because I'd have thought that, when you're dropping these cubes, you're just pretty much just guessing, completely guessing where these cubes will go. But you can actually pretty accurately guess by how many times it kind of falls down and trickles down, and how many different layers it hits to give you more of an educated guess rather than just purely punting. But there we go. That is Ima Rosa at number 18. At number 17, I have the Game of 49. So this is an auction and bidding style game mixed with a bit of Connect 4. So you have this big grid of, I believe, 49 numbers. It might even be more than that, I'm not quite sure. And then you are basically trying to, again, bid on these different numbers, or win the bids on these different numbers, so you can create a chain of 4. So either 4 horizontally, 4 vertically, or 4 diagonally. When you do that, you're going to win. It had quite a cool economy in this game, as you'd only ever get refreshed with money when these certain cards would come out from the deck. Sometimes that could happen quite rapidly, so you can have a big bunch of money at once. Sometimes it will really string out a long time, and you have to kind of spread your money as far and as long as you can without spending too much, or be left out of pocket and not be able to win any bids. So I did quite like that. In fact, I liked most things about this game. The only issue I had with this game, and it was quite a significant issue, was that because you were so clear on what you had to win and what you couldn't allow other people to win, if people had 3 in a row or 3 in a column, and then they had that 4th one to try and complete it, then you have to outbid them. So that means you have to throw every single penny you have, or at least one more than they have, and that's a decision that's completely taken out of your hands. You need to do it. And sometimes that could really affect player order, because if you know that somebody's got more money than you, you just pass, everybody passes, and then you leave the responsibility for that one person purely to stop the other people, which is going to throw the rest of their money away. Which, you might see that as a layer of the gameplay, but I just thought that was a bit of just a thing you had to do rather than having a choice you had to do. So I thought that was a bit frustrating. So it became very much a game of blocking rather than a game of actually, spending your money to do what you wanted to do. So that was my lasting impression on the Game of 49. At number 16, I have Steam Time. So this is a game I was actually quite looking forward to, because it's a kind of a worker placement style game by Rudiger Dawn. This one, you are placing these airships out on these different strips, which are going to rotate from round after round, so it's going to change. But whenever you place these airships, you can only ever go further down the track. So it's got this kind of time track system where you can't go back on yourself. And you're trying to collect these gems, and these gems are going to boost your ability to do other things. So whenever you collect these gems, you're going to put them on your player board, which means when you take another action, the more gems you have of that colour, the better return you get from it. But additionally, you have to complete these mission cards, which will spend your gems. So you've got this kind of fluctuating engine, which gets better or weaker and stronger as the game goes on. I did quite like the way that worked. And to be honest, I think I was maybe the player who didn't enjoy this as much as the other people did. My mum, for example, really enjoyed this game, and she took a lot from it. I thought it was okay. I thought it was average at best, which is rare for me to say for a Rudiger Dawn game. But for a kind of a medium light worker placement style game with a fraction of engine building, I thought it was a decent effort, but I just didn't really kind of have enough. There wasn't enough engine building for me to kind of sink my teeth into and to enjoy it as much as I would have liked. So that is Steam Time at number 16. At number 15, I have Root. So this one actually featured recently on my my top 10 games I'd like to play, but not add to my collection or not own. But I finally got to play this game at a convention, and I was glad for the experience. So I ended up playing the Capped faction, which I was told was the simplest of the bunch, because I was the only player who hadn't played this game yet. So this is a very asymmetrical style game where every player's got a different faction, these kind of wooden critters, and you are trying to all complete your own objective. So I think my objective was to gain as many points as I can by kind of crafting these objects or controlling these different regions and things. Other players have kind of more of a program mechanism. Some of them have this kind of one troop by themselves and they're kind of scooting around and messing with other people's plans. I did like the way that it was pulled off. It did work very well mechanically. It came together quite well considering how asymmetrical it was. But I would say that my kind of impressions or my concerns about the game certainly were true. This is not the easiest game to teach because you kind of need to know what the other people are doing in order to try and stop them. And additionally, there's quite a few little fiddly rules and things as well. And I think the thing I hated most about this game, and I was really enjoying it up to a point, but suddenly somebody pulled out a card that pretty much took everything I had off the board. And considering I'd spent, an hour or over an hour putting these stuff on the board, I wasn't aware this card was in the deck. And then all of a sudden, boom, all my troops have gone. I've got to start again from scratch. I hate cards like that. I just cannot play games like that. It just absolutely completely tarnished the experience for me. I wouldn't play it again because of those cards. And that was sadly the lasting impression I had from it. So I've heard there is a deck that does take those out of the gameplay, which probably would be more to my taste, but I just don't think I'm really willing to learn all the different factions. So despite being a game I appreciate, I thought it was a good design, certainly an ambitious design. It's certainly not one for me. At number 14, I have The Lord of the Rings. This is the original cooperative game by Reiner Knizia. And this was a game that I've obviously never tried, but one that I always wanted to try because it's a different approach to a co-op game. Most of them follow that standard action points pandemic style system, which to be honest I'm completely bored of. I'm fatigued. I'm not interested in that style of gameplay anymore. But Lord of the Rings does something different. As you're managing a hand of cards, you are kind of tributing these cards. You've got these different tracks and things. The game is going to fight against you by hitting you with these different events and things. And I love this constant pressure as you all control a different hobbit, but as the game goes on, Sauron is kind of encroaching on you, pushing towards you, or you might be pushing towards them, but you can spend your time, which is precious, in order to move backwards and things to try and avoid capture. We did quite well for a first game. I think the first round of the game we did waste a lot of opportunities. We didn't really understand how the game played because we were completely learning this at scratch as we went on, so we didn't really learn the games beforehand, which could have affected our achievement during the game. But we did really start to enjoy the process. We started to understand our mistakes, and we did quite well considering it was our completely first chance. We got to the last phase, we nearly finished it, but we all died on that last climb to Mount Doom. But I enjoyed the experience. I've certainly enjoyed it, or would anticipate playing this one again. I'd love to try it again and see if we could improve on our previous performance. It played pretty succinctly. It only took about an hour or so. So I thought it was quite a nice experience and a sidestep from most of the traditional co-op games that you play. And I love the Lord of the Rings theme as well. So I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to. At number 13, I have Valletta. So this is a medium-light Euro-style game as you have this big kind of grid of cards, and you're basically trying to collect resources by playing through this deck and ultimately build buildings which will add more cards into your hand, increase your presence on the board to get victory points and things. As the game goes on, this piece is going to climb along this track, which incentivizes you to build in that certain column, and you're also unlocking little bonuses as you go throughout the game as well. That's pretty much the extent of the game. It's quite a predictable Euro-style game, but it's still a pleasant one. The deck building is pretty decent. You do tailor your deck a bit as the game goes on. But additionally, I love this fact that when the game ends, you get to play through your whole deck one more time, so you can get your dividends from the investments you've made beforehand. I did think you were a bit pigeonholed in this game as you were incentivized to build next to buildings you've already built because you get a discount for doing so. So it kind of felt like your plans were almost scripted. But despite that, I did enjoy the game. I thought it was a fine example of a medium-light game, but ultimately one that's not going to stand out from amongst the pack. At number 12, I have Nefertiti. So this is a pretty unknown almost set collection bidding auction style game. As you have a bunch of different auctions on the board, I think there's 6 or so, and basically you're trying to put your little player pieces on these different segments, which are kind of pre-planned bids, I suppose, and you can try and outbid them or different things like that. But each of these different auctions resolves in a different way. So some of them might say, once you have 3 in a row or 3 of these bids in a row in this grid, then it will trigger, or different things like that. So I did quite like the way that worked. It was certainly different. Again, this is another first impressions review, so this one does have potential to climb. I think it's probably only going to go up rather than down, because I still have quite a bit to explore here. But then ultimately you're trying to collect these different artifacts for endgame scoring and set collection bonuses. But it works quite well. It's nice and smooth. Again, it plays pretty quickly. wasn't long, in about an hour. And it did have some good depth here, some layers of decisions and things. So again, I'm quite excited to play this one again and see what else Nefertiti has to offer. At number 11, I have Medici, which is another auction bidding style game. This is one of the Reiner Knizia classic games, and one of the only ones I hadn't played actually, so I was very anticipating playing this game. It's very hard to get hold of nowadays, but I actually managed to play a copy from somebody at a convention, so it was very nice that they had the option for me to try this one without buying it beforehand. To be honest, I was completely surprised about how simple this game was. I was expecting something a bit more involved. So this one, you are simply bidding on these different cards, and you can either as the active player, you can reveal 1, 2 or 3 cards, and they all relate to a different resource type. And all these resource types has a a part on the board represented by like a pyramid or a scale or a track basically. And the more of cards of those you collect as the game goes on, you're going to climb up that pyramid, potentially unlocking points as you go, but also trying to be the highest on it because you get more points for doing that as well. But additionally, each card has a number on it, and you want to make sure that you have the highest total value of numbers, because you can get a big points injection if you manage to pull that one off. But I suppose the twist on this game is that you do have a capacity of cards you can keep. So say I already collected 4 cards, my opponent already collected 3 cards, but if somebody hadn't collected any cards at all, then they can maybe reveal 3 cards because nobody else can store them, and then get them from an absolute bargain price. So that almost reminded me a bit of Ra, where you could wait for people to bid things and then push your luck and see what you can get for free. So I did quite like the way that worked. You have to be very savvy in how you spend your money. And I suppose the biggest thing I liked about this game was the fact that your money is your points in this game, which adds that extra layer of complexity and nuance to the game, where you really do have to factor in how much you're going to spend in the first place, because ultimately that's going to be coming off your final score. At number 10, I have Endeavour Age of Sail. So this one is a very beautiful looking game about trying to explore Europe and then colonise the rest of the world as you spread out. So a very cool theme, but I like the way that those two things go hand in hand as you sail and explore these different regions, collecting these tokens as you go and increasing your little tableau to make you more efficient at getting new workers into your fold, or returning them from previous actions you've taken, or increasing your ability to build better buildings and more efficient buildings. I like the way that as you do that, you unlock these new regions of the world, which will let you, or let the other players, or even you yourself, explore into new land, collect victory points and even more tokens again to increase your tableau. I like these cards as you could collect as the game went on to increase your stats, but another part of your tableau was to increase your capacity to store more cards. So I like the way that works. A very nice little, like a very Civ Light style game, I suppose. But the key mechanisms of the game are so simple, as you're just placing your discs onto the board, collecting tokens and increasing your stats. So actually a remarkably smooth game, a very easy to teach game for a midweight Euro. And I thought the game worked very well. I like the way the buildings worked. I like the little efficiency puzzle and the little bit of area control as well, as you try to control or be the governor of the different continents and things to give you a permanent stat boost. So again, a nice, well-rounded midweight Euro, a very pleasant experience actually, and one that I'd probably recommend to a lot of people. At number 9, I have probably one of my biggest surprises of the month actually. This is Newsford by Uwe Rosenberg. So if you regularly watch my content, you might know that I do have a bit of a rocky relationship with Rosenberg games. Some of them I like quite a bit, some of them I'm quite underwhelmed with, and they're usually his biggest titles. Newsford strikes a balance between the two, because it's actually quite a simple game, but it is quite deep, I suppose. There's quite a lot going on here. It's your worker placement style game. This one, your resources is fish, and your intake of fish is going to change each round as you invest in these boats. And these boats are going to cover up these spots, which means that the more spots you cover up again increases your intake of fish, and you're going to use that fish to pay these elders. These elders are going to give you little abilities and worker placement spots that only you can go to. And that goes hand in hand with this fish resources, as you can supply fish and get gold, which is quite a rare resource, or or you can kind of build buildings which will work in different ways. And the building part of the game actually works very similarly to a game like Glass Road, as you have this grid. But as this game starts, you're going to have kind of these forestry covering up certain spots on the grid, which you can cut down for wood, which is another resource that you can use to build boats and things. I like the way this game worked. It was actually very simple, and I suppose the most impressive thing about this game was that we played a 5-player game, which normally I steer away from when I'm playing more involved Euro games because they simply take too long. This one, we managed to play again a 5-player game in about 90 minutes, which is remarkably impressive, I think. Very little downtime, some pretty interesting decisions, and I was left feeling quite positive on this one. At number 8, I have Gunkimono. So this is a tile placement, kind of an abstract style game, as you are playing these tiles from your hand, trying to create this big kind of grid of certain types of these samurai warriors, because you're going to get points for doing so. However, you can sacrifice those points in order to climb up these tracks, and when you climb up all these tracks with the different colours, you're going to reach certain checkpoints where you can place your temples onto the board, which means every single turn you're going to start generating points of that type. So once you do that, people are going to start trying to sabotage that grid to try and make you take fewer and fewer points. Very clean set of rules. Simply just place a tile down on the board and either take those points from placement or climb up the tracks. And I did like the way that works. Now, I will say I'm not quite sure where this one lies in terms of the depth and layers of strategy here. So most kind of simple abstract games do have hidden layers. I'm not quite sure this one does. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that's not especially what the game is trying to achieve. It is very accessible, but it still has some good decisions. But again, I think the nuance isn't quite there to the level I would have hoped. But that being said, it's a 30 to 45 minute game. It's pretty snappy, not much downtime, some interesting decisions. So I did enjoy it. It's a pleasant experience and a pretty, very close to a recommendation from me. Maybe more players would steer this one upwards, maybe slightly downwards, but I like it. It's staying in my collection for now, and we're certainly going to play this one some more times. That is Gunkimono. Okay, so my top 7 games are going to gain my shield of quality. So these are all pretty strong recommendations from me. So at number 7, I have First Rat. So this one came from nowhere, really. This is a simple racing style game, a family weight style game with some extra levels to it, as you are moving these rats of your colour up this track, and you can either move up to kind of 1 to 5 spaces, or you can move multiple rats up to 3 spaces, as long as you all land on the same coloured space that you land on. But they have to be different ones, and then you're going to collect the resources of that type, which is going to be kind of your vinegar and your tin cans and things. So very kind of cute little thematic thing, as all these rats are collecting these resources to build a spaceship. And then you're trading those in to either kind of get these points on the scoring track. You can try and race to the top as quickly as you can to get more points that way. You can increase your engine as you visit these different little helpers on the way as you climb up this track and buy things with cheese. And they're going to let you kind of, again, collect resources quicker, or get double the amount of resources on one occasion, or get end game scoring bonuses. But this game does have a lot going on, because despite being a very simple framework of either moving one rat or multiple rats, there's quite a lot of follow-up things as well, as you can climb up this light track, which again will give you more resources and even more points the quicker you do things. Just a bunch of different ways to get points here. I think the best parting thing to say is check out my review. I've reviewed the game quite comprehensively, so take a look at that one. I've done that recently, so that's going to explain a lot more detail than I have right now. But very nice game, a big pleasant surprise. At number 6, I have Splitter, which is probably the most unassuming game on this list. This is a very simple, affordable roll and write style game, where you simply have this little grid on the sheet of paper, which is split down the middle with this kind of dotted line. And all you're going to do on this game is you're going to roll a pair of dice, which is also going to show 2 numbers. You're going to write one number on one side, and you're going to write the other number on the mirrored side of the other side. So it's kind of like this symmetrical thing where if you flip the page over, you're going to write the opposite number there. And the idea is that you are trying to collect these little clusters of numbers of that same numerical value. So you want the number ones on their own, you want 2s in pairs, you want 3s in trios, you want 4s in sets of 4, 5s in sets of 5s, and so on, because you're going to get the equal amount of points for doing so. So each set of 5 is going to give you 5 points. But this is a real throwback to the simpler days of roll and write games where there's next to no rules, but there's still some interesting decisions here. The game gets tighter and tighter as the game goes on, and this is a wonderful experience to play in literally 10 to 15 minutes. Another game where that ratio is completely off the charts. You can't really get much better games than this in that 10 to 15 minute time stamp. So loving this one at the moment. I'm introducing this one to a bunch of different players, being unanimously liked, and this one could be a sleeper hit. That is Splitter. At number 5, I have Long Shot, the dice game. This was another game that I was kind of, debating backing on Kickstarter maybe a year or so ago, and also debating buying it. Fortunately, I played this one at a convention at a very high player count. I think 7 of us played, and this one I just instantly fell in love with. So this is like a betting style game with a roll and write aspect to it. All you're going to do on your turn is you're going to roll, I think it's a d8, with each of those pip or face values related to a corresponding horse on the board. And then you're going to roll another one, which I think is a d3 or something, which corresponds how many spaces that horse is going to move on the track. But whenever you roll a certain coloured horse, you also tick something off on your sheet, which is either going to contribute to these rows and columns that you're trying to do to get you bonuses, which can be more money. It can let you bet on horses. It can let you kind of increase the ability to pull other horses along, because whenever you move a horse, at the bottom of each of these horse cards is going to be it's going to show all the other horses that are going to move one space as well. And if you have a lot of stock or a lot of money invested in a certain horse, then you can tick off that spot on all the other horses. So when whoever rolls, your horse is also going to move. And you can also even choose to buy these horses, where if you finish in the top 3, you're going to get a big payout. What a wonderful game that scales tremendously well. Plays in about 20-30 minutes, interesting decisions, a real fun factor, a party vibe. I was just absolutely blown away. I thought this was a fantastic game that, if you like games like Camel Up, this game completely blows it out of the water. More decisions, plays in the same amount of time, and just more interesting. That is A Long Shot, the dice game. At number 4, I have Cascadia. So this one is a pretty simple tile placement style game, a little pattern recognition style game, as you are drafting a pair of tiles, or a tile and a token, and you're going to add them to your little environment board, trying to connect environment to environment, collecting the big surface area as you can to get points. But also each of these tiles is going to have a token associated to it in 5 different animal types. You've got like your bears, you've got your elks, you've got your birds. And you're trying to, all these animals score in different ways depending on the pattern they're built on. So for example, I think it's hawks, they have to have line of sight to each other, or the elks have to be in straight lines and things. And you're trying to puzzle out as much as you can, as efficiently as you can, to get as many points as you can, trying to synergize them with each other. What a pleasant experience this one is. Again, plays in 30 to 45 minutes, easy rule set, interesting decisions, very relaxed vibe to it, looks beautiful, and really one of those games I can't fault. I can see why this one blew up, and I'm enjoying it a lot. At number 3, I have Yokohama. This was a game I've been looking to play for a long time, but it's been out of print. Finally managed to track a copy down. So this one is a mid-weight Euro game that has a lot of shared DNA with a game called Istanbul, which is, I think, a slightly more popular game. So basically you have a big grid of tiles. Some might let you collect resources, some let you trade resources in to get endgame points and things. But the way you take the action on these action boards is by placing these cubes and building routes on them, and then moving your main player piece, or tracing your player piece through where you've got some kind of influence on. And depending on how much influence you have on a certain tile is going to determine the strength of the action you take. So if you had, say, 4 presents on something, that means you can collect 4 of that type of resource. So again, you're going to be a lot more efficient if you invest in certain tiles and plan your routes accordingly. I also like the fact that you can basically lay your buildings down on these different tiles as well, to have not only have some permanent influence, but also give you income when other people visit those buildings. So again, a very well ironed out Euro game. I like the multiple ways you have to get points, the race to get to different things, getting your little trade houses down, the economy of getting things into your personal supply from your warehouse, because you'd have a bunch of more cubes and things to create more coverage on the board, more little houses and more trade houses, but you have to go to another spot in order to unlock them in the first place. So Another game I can't really fault much with. I really enjoyed my experience with it, but because it is so similar to Istanbul, I don't think there's room for both in my collection. I have quite an affinity with Istanbul, so I have chosen Istanbul over this one, but it really could have gone either way. At number 2, I have Hamburgum by Mac Gertz. So Mac Gertz, mainly known for Concordia and other rondel-style games such as Imperial or Navigador. This one is another rondel game, which is kind of, his trademark. And one that has a lot of shared, a lot of similarities to Navigador. I like the fact that in this game you have that classic Mac Gertz scoring system where you actually invest in the type of things you're going to score for. It has quite a cool economy in the game, as there is a supply and demand factor. As certain resources become more available or less available. And it was just, again, another very well designed, very well ironed out Euro style game. I think the biggest factor this one maybe didn't even place number 1 this month is because we played at 2 players. It became very apparent to us after a few rounds that this game would really start to shine when you get to that 3 or 4 player count, just to add more competition to get coverage on the main board. And to add a bit more of a wild card to the market and the way the different money is passed around and things, and the availability of resources. But I thought the game was a very good design. I think time will tell if there is room for this one and Navigador in my collection, but I certainly want to try it a few more times at the different player counts to see if it is quite up to those standards. But a wonderful game. I really enjoyed my play with it despite playing suboptimally at that 2 player count, but still a lot of promise with Hamburgum. And finally, at number 1, the best game I've played this month is Fiore by Rainer Knizia. So this one is another point salad style game from Knizia, which is kind of a follow-up from what he did in his last design or co-design with Witchstone. This one, you are drafting cards each turn from a hand of cards, all associated to a different action on the board, and all these different areas is going to score in a different way. So some of them you're trying to basically chain a bunch of your little glass tiles together, and the more you chain, the more points you're going to get. But additionally, if you go to certain symbols, you can get double points, or if you surround a little diamond, you can get like a bonus follow-up action. And there's another ones where you're just trying to get all your little glass markers in a row, which is going to get more and more points as these scores are added together. So you're incentivized to draft cards to try and break other people's chains to stop them getting more points. You're trying to build these pyramids as well to get you more and more points, or even like shipping goods off, where you almost have this like chicken mechanism where you're trying to load up these different goods and then ship them off, and hopefully that you can get a kind of monopoly on that to stop other people from scoring as well. One of the best examples of a drafting game where everything you want to do is there in front of you. Do you want to score the most points? Do you want to stop someone else from getting the most points? And I just love the way you are showered in points in this game. No matter what you do, it's a satisfying turn, and I just think this game is fantastic. Another game that you want to be playing at least with 3 players. I think 2 players is a little bit too open and not quite as interesting, but the rest of the game is an absolute joy to play. You get this one done in about 60 minutes, and I think it's a fantastic design. And Knizia is on a winning spree for me at the moment, enjoying everything he's putting out. So there we have it, a slightly longer episode, this one with 22 games. Again, thanks for joining. As usual, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check out my other links and stuff below for like Patreon, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. But for everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye now.